Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Anelisa Dabula. Today I'll be doing my presentation on exploring open educational resources, development models, insights for TVET, colleges and universities in South Africa. I am currently registered as a PhD candidate at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. I hold a master's in population studies and I also hold a bachelor's of social science in geography and environmental management. So the underlying idea that triggered the study was that students are facing unequal access to education and educational resources in South Africa. Open Educational Resources, OER, was conceived at the 2002 UNESCO Forum to describe the provision of openly licensed educational resources either in print or conveyed using information and communication technologies, ICTs, that are available for consultation, use, adaptation, and dissemination by anyone. OER can potentially address the issue of inequality of access to resources through digitized materials offered freely and openly for educators and students. So the main research question that guides the study is what models of OER adoption, funding creation, use, adaptation, and dissemination could be introduced in the local PSET sector in order to respond to economic, cultural, and political injustices. And the question that I'll be answering in today's presentation is what types of models occur and how can these be classified? So in 2017, the South African Department of Higher Education and Training, DHET, accentuated the use of OER in its draft Open Learning Policy Framework for South African post-school education and training. So this policy was driven by a concern for social justice and therefore motivated by the need for redress, equity in access to opportunity, flexibility, and choice. The policy framework mandates the establishment of a network of educational institutions, which complemented by a network of learning support centers enhanced by internet connectivity for learners and staff to create shared material. So the aim was to support the development and expansion of open learning principles and practices in the PSET sector, which was intended to complement rather than replace traditional classroom campus-based provisions in the colleges and the universities. So with this open learning policy, the establishment of the National Open Learning System, NOLS, was one of the activities put forward in this policy framework, which NOLS is a platform to share OER with the hope of increasing access to learning opportunities for South Africans through high quality, self-directed, interactive learning materials, online or offline, that enable learners to select and complete modules, including robust formative assessments. And the methodology that was adopted in the study was an integrative literature review, which includes the conceptual synthesis of models of OER funding, creation, use, adaptation, and dissemination that have been crafted or adopted by countries, states, provinces, or institutions in the post-secondary sector, usually to inform the PSEC sector in South Africa. So 86 journal articles on OER were acquired through Google searches and Google alerts. And keywords allowed the researcher, myself, to find articles that covered relevant topics, and OER and open learning were interchangeably used by authors. Okay, so here we are now on the findings. So during the study and during my investigation, I found that the models of OER were then split into seven subsections, which were identified and grouped into 7 different types based on the initiatives offered to the user. So the models below show that funding is a crucial component of OER creation and development, and that without funding of some form, OER creation, use, adaptation, and dissemination is unlikely to be sustainable at all. Yeah, so the different types of models that we have, it's regional geographical linguistic model, central government model, provincial model, interinstitutional model, institutional model, community-based model, and lastly, a commercial model. So here we have the regional geographic or linguistic model, which consists of the Nordic Coalition and OER Africa. So the Nordic Coalition was established in 2013 by the European Union, which launched a large-scale initiative on opening up education. This was the beginning of the Nordic OER initiative in promoting and utilizing OER in the Nordic countries with a focus on creation. So here it was funded by the regional government, and the aim of this was for awareness, knowledge building, networking, and creating an arena for dissemination of OER and openness in education between Denmark, Ireland, Finland, Iceland, Norway, and lastly, Sweden. And here we can see that the OER has a website that is disseminated, which is a website for advocacy dissemination. Then followed by the OER Africa, which is funded by international donors and is which was established in 2008 to help educators and the institutions in which they work to conceptualize, adapt, implement, and use OER to improve content and practice of teaching and learning. And this is funded by international donors and is a commission to create English OER from various institutions across Africa. However, the one thing that stood out for me in this model is that it creates OER in higher education for Anglophone Africa. Therefore, it's actually not including other languages that are widely spoken within the African continent. And this is also hosted on their OER website, which I must commend that it is actually well established. Followed by the central government model, which is the USA federal government model, which looks at colleges and universities funded by the US government in competitive bid. This was brought forth in line when students were dropping out of universities due to the high cost of textbooks. So they wanted to create OER and open textbooks. So the conditions for the latter grant stipulated that applications should demonstrate the greatest potential to achieve the highest level of savings for students through sustainable expanded use of open textbooks. And I should point out, ladies and gentlemen, that this was spearheaded by none other than the former US President Barack Obama, which has to date, the administration has supported open textbooks development in the USA and the United States, resulting in students saving $1 billion in the past 5 years. Then we are followed by the provincial model, which is spearheaded by British Columbia, which is funded by the Canadian Ministry of Advanced Education and Skills Training and managed by BC Campus. So a provincial model is a province in Canada which has provided funding since 2012 to support innovation and collaboration for OER or low-cost textbook initiative. So they created their own OERs or low-cost textbooks from scratch. And also should point out that it's hosted on the website, the BC Open Textbook Collection. So anyone has access to this website. And then bring it closer to home, to South Africa. We have the interinstitutional model, which was a collaboration between the University of Pretoria and the University of Cape Town, funded none other than the South African Department of Higher Education and Training. So this model illustrated was development of the OER term bank, which is a free multilingual glossary which allows students and lecturers to check meanings and definitions of words in South African language. But I should point out that it's selected key academic terms. However, the one thing about this though is that it's not or is not widely advertised, therefore it's the most underutilized OER model to date. Then we have the institutional model spearheaded by the UCT. In 2014, open access policy introduced at UCT encouraged the sharing of teaching materials. Lecturers are encouraged to share on a voluntary basis as institutions want to ensure that developed content is created from an African perspective, curated by UCT and shared locally and internationally. And one thing that I should point out about this model that it points out that it's very crucial to build a relationship between funders and institutions in order to create a sustainable OER platform. So UCT creates their own OER from scratch. And one thing about this model is that it is hosted on the Open UCT repository that makes available digitally present of scholarly outputs produced at UCT, example theses, dissertations, journal articles, books, chapters, technical and research reports, and OER. However, the only downside about this OER model is that only UCT staff and UCT students can adapt and access this website. So you'd have to be a registered student or staff working under the university. Then you come to the community model, which is the peer-to-peer university. This is an initiative which is funded by several foundations. This model here wants to create a community around OER instead of having OER just sitting on a repository. And and this is done by open discussions known as learning circles based on social learning, collaboration, and education as a social good. And one thing about this model is that it is free to sign up and it's an online platform and it's hosted on the peer-to-peer website. And lastly, we have the commercial model, which is more of a business model run by Lumen Learning. And this is more of an outsourcing where the university, the institution will not be the one creating the OER from scratch. Rather, they would outsource the service to Lumen Learning. And this, however, would come at a charge of $25 membership fee. It's either it will be per term or per course, which would be charged onto the school, the students' university fees. And this one here would require a person to sign in order to access these OERs, and it's not free of charge. And now, ladies and gentlemen, it comes to the end of my presentation where I'll be talking about my recommendations. So one thing that I found that there is a need for government policy to mandate the creation or the use of OER to address the challenges of unequal access to teaching materials. As I pointed out before, that OERs in North American universities, the OER models focus on cost saving as a way to help students succeed in tertiary education. Sustainable cost saving models like open textbook initiative, such as the central government model and the provincial model, initiative considered an economic transformation as funding structures for educational material development, as government taxes would be directly allocated to the funding of the OER development. These two models do provide useful models of national and provincial funding for TVET to consider, especially as costs to students in models are considerably reduced or not incurred at all. Then we have the institutional IP regulations need to be adjusted in order to give individual lecturers the right to publish and share their teaching material, which an example would have been UCT, the institutional model, which allows the staff to voluntarily create OER in order to allow for them to share them locally and internationally. And a collaboration within and between PSETs to find the most urgently needed teaching materials. A coordinated approach will ensure that resources are not created in duplication, which is a clear example of the intra-institutional model, which will allow people to all institutions to be part and parcel of the creation of OER from the point of inception all the way to the point of dissemination. Which brings me to the end of my presentation, ladies and gentlemen. I would just like to say thank you for taking the time for listening to this presentation today. And I would like to say thank you to Dr. Glenda Cox, my mentor, for the support she has given me from the start of the research. And thank you to the Emeritus Professor Cheryl Hodgkins Williams for her unconditional support. And I would like to also thank the COOL team for the countless support. And also would like to say thank you to DHEAD for this opportunity.